Sir.
I understand you're going to lead us on a discussion of Ground Floor.
Yeah, let's roll into it. So, Ground Floor, published in 2012, designed by David Short. The artist is Ariel Sione, I think is how you pronounce it. I apologize if not. Published by Tasty Minstrel Games, originally on Kickstarter. Plays 2 to 6 players, and the published playtime is 90 to 150 minutes. As far as availability and cost, I've seen it as cheap as maybe $20-25 used secondhand on the BGG marketplace.
Okay.
But online, I've seen it for going about $40-45 online.
Okay.
And I'm noticing though lately that a lot of places are out of stock. I don't know about Tasty Minstrel's site directly.
Okay.
It may be available, but it can be found. I know it's on Amazon, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
As far as plays and player counts that I have experienced, I've played it 3, 4, 5, and 6, and I've played it now 9 or 10 times. And I'll be honest, I've enjoyed it across all those player counts. How about you?
I played once 5-player, but it was eons ago, and I can't even count that. I've played 3-player twice and 6-player once.
Okay, cool. So sadly, rolling into kind of scalability here, sadly, I haven't played it 2-player, and I feel bad because David Short, a year and a half ago or so, asked if I'd write a review of the game, and I said, well, I want to play it 2-player first, so I haven't written that review because I haven't played it 2-player. So I apologize, David, but hopefully this makes up for it.
Oh, David, don't take this the wrong way. I'm not sure I want to play this 2-player.
I think it's better at the higher end
Yeah.
of things. I think it plays similarly across all player counts. There's more competition in the game for spots with more players. So you and I think, see that as a positive with more competition.
I kind of think a 3-player is even kind of a training game.
I didn't mind it 3. It's not.
Well, I didn't
as
mind
tight.
it 3.
Right. It's not right.
But because it's not as tight.
Sure. Well, that kind of leads into the fact that at the Conclave recently, a couple weeks ago, we played at 6, and I got to be honest, I was really cringing at the idea because a lot of times in games, you'll see, it plays 2 to 500, or it'll play 2 to 6,
up to 8 players,
right? And you would never consider playing it at the higher end. A good example of that is something like Caverna. I have no interest playing that game 6 players. The amount of downtime would just be. Oh, it plays 7.
Yeah.
Oh God. It's even worse. So I kind of had that initial going into our play with 6 players. Mm-hmm. But I got to be honest, man. I was blown away at how well and how smooth and how, I guess, relatively short of a playtime it played in. And I would not hesitate to play it 6 players again.
When you consider that 4 of those players were essentially noobs. Paul Chad had played before, but his play had been a long time ago too, so he had to be retaught, and the other guys were noobs. Given that consideration, and everyone got what was being taught to them, they minded their AP. No one really AP'd, and we banged that thing out, and it was awesomely competitive and a lot of fun.
Yeah, I guess I should throw in a caveat that with me having played it as many times as I had, I was able to kind of keep the game moving and not be a cattle prod to people, and rush people, but made sure that nobody suffered from excessive AP.
You do know it's your turn, right?
Yeah, exactly. I got nothing. I was blown away and very pleasantly surprised at how well it played 6 players.
Yeah.
Both in lack of downtime, keeping things moving, and how short of a playtime, relatively speaking, that it was.
Yep.
So, definitely from 3 to 6, can definitely recommend it, I think.
Indeed.
So Ground Floor is a business-themed worker placement game where the overall goal is to develop your business and expand and upgrade your corporate headquarters. Players do this by upgrading their existing offices in their corporate headquarters building, as well as growing upward, quite literally, by adding new floors to your building. Throughout the game, players will take actions such as hiring new employees, which garner them more time markers, which are essentially the workers that they use to gain those resources, the money and information in the game. Players then take those resources and turn those into new floors and building upgrades and tenant improvements that will provide the victory points that they need to win the game. The game takes place over a series of up to 9 rounds, with each round broken up into 5 phases. Receive income, hire employees, schedule business, and conduct business, which those 2 are kind of the meat of the game. And then finally, there's a cleanup phase or a reorganize phase of the game. The game ends, like I said, either at the end of the 9th round or at the end of the round where any player builds their 6th or more floor. And that's pretty much, that's it in a nutshell. So let's talk components and graphic design.
Let's do that.
Before we get into the meat of this, let's start there. Your thoughts on the components specifically?
Love them. I think they're very good. All the chits are nice and thick. Everything is very well produced.
Well, the box itself is bulletproof, I think.
That's like 4 millimeter thick cardboard.
Yeah,
or something.
It's ridiculous how thick and sturdy the actual box itself is.
That's a heavy game.
It's heavy cardboard, literally.
Yes.
The board itself has a real nice finish to it. A really thick player boards. The chits, or I guess the money and the information in the game, are thick cardboard.
Yep.
All the time markers and the goods are all wooden cubes or wooden discs. The CEOs are little resin pieces.
Yes.
Which, I got to be honest, the bottom side, they don't always sit flat because there's little nubs or here and there.
Purple guy looks like he had a little too much to drink. He kind of wobbles. You need to file that down.
Yeah, exactly. You file a little sandpaper or whatever, sits flush, no worries. So I got to be honest, I was really happy with the component quality on this. As far as the graphic design, I think it's pretty clear. The player boards have almost like a player aid printed on it. It's a step-by-step of all the phases of the game and what takes place. So I think that was smart placement by Tasty Minstrel to put that there. There's also a player aid which shows all the floors and the tenant improvements and all the bonuses that those give. So that's useful as well. I kind of have a bit of a gripe, though.
One too.
As far as component or graphic design is, which floor is it? Like, the game's called Ground Floor, so your tableau, your actual player board is floor 1. Yeah. And so being able to figure out, okay, is this my 2nd or 3rd floor or 4th floor that I'm building? How do you count that?
The first tile I place is my 2nd floor. It's kind of weird.
Right, and so that's a little less than clear, kind of.
And we're saying that because we've seen that in the games.
Right. Oh yeah,
it's not clear to people all the times.
Even a guy who's played it as much as I have, I still struggle with that unless I recently played the game and it's fresh in my head. Sure. The Kickstarter, one of the stretch goals, I believe it was this kind of almost like a ruler type thing, to where it showed which floor.
Right, you just lay it right down by your tableau.
And it shows, this is your 2nd, this is your 3rd, etc.
Right.
Which, that was fantastic. That was great. But I feel like that should have been kind of in the base game.
Yeah, you can get it at the BGG Geek store. If Tasty Minstrel makes another copy of the game, another reprint of the game, I hope that's included.
Right, yeah, it shouldn't be kind of an add-on type thing. But other than that, the only other graphic design...
Well, I got one.
Oh, go for it. Go ahead.
The info chits and the money chits are pretty small.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I
just
how'd that go?
It's like 2 cube size,
Yeah, they are small. Yeah, and when you have big clod hoppers, I get that. So I have one other little thing, and the only real explanations that I've needed to do after teaching the game is in the advertising agency. Where players get bonus time markers added there, or if they don't,
the 3 different ones,
right? And so I think it's clear, but it can be a little confusing until you learn it. Until it kind of okay, I get it. I go here, so I get a bonus one. The other one is just showing that you get 1 time marker. The one that was there, you get. You don't get any bonuses. But other than that, I would say overall, well done on the graphic design as well.
Totally. What do you think about the rule book and its clarity and quality? Because I've never I don't own a copy currently, and
Right.
I've never even seen the rule book.
Really?
Yeah.
Never.
Never.
Wow.
You
Okay.
taught the game every time I've seen it.
Yeah, I guess there's been no need, provided you
Right.
trust me that I taught it right.
Wait a minute.
How
many did you lose?
the rulebook's really easy and well laid out. There are tons of pictures. There's little Post-it notes, like they're printed on there, but they look like Post-it notes for little reminders of things and stuff.
That's kind of clever.
Yeah, it is. There are plenty of examples, and there's a really, really good example in the rule book for the advertising agency and the way to resolve that, because it can get really, really crowded when you're playing 5 and 6 players, and it can be a little confusing. Do I do it on popularity order here, and here, or do I do it in a certain order? And the example was perfect. Cleared up any questions that players may have on that. I'll be honest, I think maybe once or twice throughout all my plays I've had to reference rules questions on BGG. So the fact that I haven't needed to do that often tells me that the rule book has done a good job explaining everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd give it high marks as far as rule books go.
Awesome. So this is the part of the review where we talk about what makes the game medium or heavy.
Which in this case, I feel like it's a step up from medium, but it's definitely not heavy. So maybe somewhere in between, I think is fair.
Yeah, I think a medium heavy is in that realm.
Yeah. So we break it down. We have 5 criteria or 5 different things that we discuss. First one's complexity. Second, planning. Third, luck and random factors. Game length and getting it.
Yes.
Like how long it takes to get the game. So let's start off in complexity.
Okay.
I don't think the rules are that hard to grok. As far as rules overhead, I think that's pretty low in this game. I think it's pretty easy as far as rules go.
Yeah, the only thing we've seen, we already alluded to it, trip people up in terms of rules complexity is the rules around how much additional cost of money and information it costs for each floor, because there's a base cost and an incremental cost, and until you've screwed that up, sometimes people don't get that right up. And that is a little complex, and the ruler helps with that, but I think that's really about the only thing complexity-wise I've seen people have problems with.
Yeah, makes sense. I feel like the game flows in a logical manner, and it's very procedural. Like you're gonna do if the game for every round in the game, you're going to follow the exact same steps in the exact same order, and with it being a worker placement, all the buildings, if you will, all the different things are going to resolve in the same order every turn. And so that I think that helps make it a little bit easier to learn and to understand as far as that goes. There are 5 choices of things to do on the main board, and then there's 6 on your own player board. So there are a lot of options. I mean, you're looking at any given time a minimum of 11 options. And as you add floors and you add tenant improvements and upgrades, those are going to give you even more options. So players can get maybe a little lost, I guess, and overwhelmed with a plethora, Jefe,
Where do I
choices.
put a worker?
Right. What do I do? And not only that, but when do I do it? You know what I mean? So I feel like there's some depth as far as the decision making, there's depth of complexity there, or I should say, it gets most of its complexity from the decision tree, not the rules overhead, is what a long way to say. So let's roll into planning. So this is the meat of the game. I mean, this is the entire game almost, I would say. As far, the ultimate goal is to score victory points.
Right.
And each player has to figure out the best way to go about doing that. Just like, I mean, most Euros are going to be like that. But there's a lot of different paths to take. We're all going to end up in the same place. We're all fighting.
Hopefully.
Well, we're all fighting to build floors. In the end, that's what you're trying to do, because floors equal victory points.
Right.
But how you go about getting your money and your information might be a little bit different than the way I do it, different than the way, Dave does it, et cetera, right. and just oodles of choices and paths in which to take.
To plan for.
Right.
See, I think of the planning in this game as more of an exercise in budgeting. than planning, because the two currencies, information and money, have to be budgeted, because every action you take out there is going to cost either money or it's going to cost info or a little both.
Right.
And so how do I budget what I have versus what's coming in my income phase, and what am I earning through this turn, so that I can spend the 4 money and 4 info to just put a worker in the construction yard, so that I can then spend more money and more info to build a floor.
I got you. No, that actually,
I plan it on a budget basis.
Huh. Interesting. I like the way that makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot. You got anything else as far as planning goes?
The fact that I think of it as a budgeting exercise is probably surprising my wife right now. She doesn't think I know how to budget.
That's funny. I'm laughing because Amanda is probably going to be thinking the same thing, or maybe she's like, oh, maybe that's why he doesn't think of it that way. Because that's funny. So let's roll into luck and random factors.
Let's do that.
All right. So I would argue that this has a little bit more randomness in it than our typical wheelhouse type game. So
processing.
Okay, all right. So first off,
we don't share notes. So
yeah. So first off, we have the initial turn order. Every game's got some kind of randomness as far as that goes. Heck,
often a given.
Even 18XX has that, right? But then there's the economic forecast cards, okay? And those are going to do those are going to impart 2 different types of randomness in there. Limited randomness, I should say. The first thing is it's going to control the job market as far as how many workers and how expensive are they going to be to hire.
If it's a depression, it's going to be cheaper to hire workers, and there'll be more workers available.
Right, because they're out of work.
If it's a boom, well, there's fewer workers and they cost more to hire.
Right. No, and that makes sense.
Right. And you're saying that's random because of the way the deck is structured.
Sure. Well, and within, even though, let's say we're in a stable economy, just because, these 2 cards, the current one and the future one, it says stable, there's still a range within that, that it could be, 2 to 4, say, for instance.
Right.
And along with that, not only does it control the job market, but it also dictates how many customers are going to buy from the retail outlets.
Right.
Again, those are going to have the same range.
Right.
But that one thing is going to impact or impart 2 different types of randomness. Controlled randomness, or limited randomness, I think is the right way to put it.
Well, I think what you're saying is, because you see the card says boom, and you know the range.
Because that's on your player board, it shows that, right? And
it's a higher range, too, as opposed to the range for like a depression might be 0 to 1,
right,
versus 2 to 4 or something. So even the ranges are different, but you still get you see what's coming. You don't know the exact value of the 2 to 4. It might be a 3, might be a 2, might be a 4, but there's 2 to 4 coming up.
Right. My point is that one thing has multiple randomness to it. Am I conveying that? Is that making sense?
I'm just like going back to what you originally said about it, more randomness than games that we normally play or like in a game and stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and disagree with that, because I think this random it's akin, I think, to the random of the demand tiles and automobile. Right? You know the range. You know it's going to be. It's going to fall in there somewhere. It's not really all that random. It's not like, okay, here's this card. Oh crap!
All right, that's fair. No,
it's
no,
not. It's not bad. It's not bad random. And
right.
You know how I feel about random.
Well, and there is kind of, and I don't know if I would call this randomness, because it is player controlled, but it's not necessarily your player control. And what I mean by that is there's 2 different ways that the game can end. The game could conceivably go all 9 rounds, and then whoever has the most points wins. That's it. Or if a player will end it, or possibly multiple players could trigger the end,
on the same round of the floors,
by building their 6th or more floor. Right. And so I don't know if that's necessarily a random factor in it. It's more of a player-driven, timer kind of variability.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I don't think that's a random, considered a random.
Okay.
But it's definitely a variable that you need to consider while you're playing.
Right.
This game may or may not go 9 rounds. Guess what? It's not, probably.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I've never played a game yet that's gone the full 9 rounds.
Yeah.
I played some that thought
seen
it may, but it ended in the 8th round.
Yeah.
So more often than not, it's going to end by a player or players triggering the end of the game early.
Right.
So moving on into game length. I don't know that the game, the length adds much to the weight. Now, with a caveat for if anyone out there who's new is listening, for us, an hour and a half to 2.5 hour game is a standard game. I don't feel like that's anything in that range.
That's a short game.
Well, well, my point is, it's not going to add that range. There is not going to contribute to the weight of the game. I don't feel like
For us.
right. So with that in mind, I don't feel like the game length contributes to that at all.
Yeah, I've read some, horror stories from people on BGG about, oh my God, with 3 players it took 4 hours, and
You're doing it wrong.
yeah, you're APing everything, or you've got something wrong,
Or you're not planning out the majority of your turn,
Right.
or at least contingency plans when it's not your turn. You should be fully engaged.
should
Where
be.
that shouldn't be happening.
right,
Right.
And there is enough cooking to engage you.
Right. And let me ask you: do you feel like the game plays? Does it run long? Does it feel right for what it is, or
Yep.
or what?
I feel that it has a appropriate length.
Yeah, I do too. And it moves surprisingly well. And we harped on this earlier
Right.
about the player count. Like even with 6 players, as long as people are moving it along, it's humming pretty well.
Well, maybe the extended length for some is all about getting it. How long do you think it takes a new person to get it?
I think after only a couple of rounds, it should start to click.
The mechanics of placing your time workers, for sure, real quick.
And seeing how expensive it is to build the floors, because to be able to go to the construction company area, you need 4 information and 4 money, or as we call it, 4 and 4, because right. So that's just to place your time marker there in the location to say, hey, I am putting myself, making it available so I can buy something.
I'm going to pick something.
Right, either a floor or a tenant improvement.
Right.
And then, if it's your first floor, it's 4 and 4 more.
Right.
So the first floor, check that. The second floor, the first built floor, costs 8 and 8 total. It costs 4 and 4 to place it during the schedule business. Kind of a lot like in Dominant Species, how you're placing out all your time markers going around the table and everything.
Resolution.
Right? And then resolve it. But then you have time to get the extra time and the extra the extra information and the extra money to be able to pay for those extra floors.
Because that resolves last, the building of the floors and the TI. So as the different areas resolve, you could
acquire
what you need to build those things. So you're taking a bit of a exposure there.
Right. So to circle back, I feel like it may take a couple turns or a couple rounds to be able to see how that works and everything. But I would say that it may take an entire game to see kind of the way the game flows and how that flow changes as to what actions are more important at different times in the game. So you're looking at me like I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I just don't think the flow changes.
Well, okay, let me
I think the
throw
game
this
is
at you.
linear.
See, and I disagree. The reason is, say the networking area, right?
The advertising.
Yeah, the advertising.
Right?
I'm sorry.
Advertising
Thank you. Right.
and the broadcast.
Right. So in advertising, that's going to dictate turn order and the resolution for the rest of that turn and going into the next turn, next round, right? Early on, and I'd say through the mid game, it's going to be fairly contested. Late game, I feel like it kind of the game gets away from that at times.
Wow.
And focuses more on other areas to where when there's a big rush on building floors, because, again, that's the trigger for the end of the game.
Yeah, I don't see that at all. Just, I think that advertising specifically, the only time it becomes less important to me is if I acquire the tenant improvement that prevents my popularity from dropping.
Right, from regressing, right.
Because otherwise, you're always needing to invest something in the advertising to keep your popularity up, because popularity is turn order. And that's pretty important on a lot of things like building floors. I want my choice. I'll get this, and then you can pick. And the bonuses and for selling goods at the retail stores. So for me, the only time, and I like that tenant improvement. Can you tell? Sure. I get it like every time.
Right.
That's when advertising wanes for me, is when I've got my popularity up so high that I'm really just not worried about it. I don't have to go there as much.
Okay,
but you're always needing to keep your popularity up. Otherwise, I don't
see. I feel like the flow of the game changes based on player needs. So maybe not as a whole for player.
What game does not?
Well, sure, but seeing the way that it flows and the way it changes, I do feel like the game change. Maybe I'm doing a terrible job of conveying this, but I just think that there's an evolution in the way, even though it's procedural and everything resolves in the same order, there's emphasis is put in different areas at different times in the game, and it may take a player the whole game to see that kind of wavelength.
The only time I see that, like retail market, when you're selling your cubes to the demand, I'll see that wane and wax based on the economy. If the game is going to say, I'm going to buy 5 of them suckers, everybody's putting their cubes out there to get sold. But if it's depression, there's 1 or 2, it's like, people are backed off unless they want to gamble a little bit, right? So
I guess
if there is an ebb and flow or a fluctuation in the pursuit of certain actions, I think it's going to be economy driven.
Okay,
maybe that's my take.
We'll agree to disagree.
Good talk either way.
Yeah, that's
good
fine.
Talk.
Right. So what makes the game fun? Like, why are people going to want to play this game?
Well, first thing on my list is there's 2 currencies involved in the game. The money and the info we've talked about. And those are the same currencies that are in business. There's money and there's information, right? There's knowledge and there's cash flow.
Right.
And unless you're Apple, both of those things are in tight supply. And you really need to balance your acquisition and your spending, hence the budgeting, of both of those currencies to not get hosed.
Yeah, because you're going to find in the game, sometimes you're going to be flush with cash and information poor, and vice versa.
And that's a bad thing.
Right, because you want to maintain a balance, because a lot of times, in most things, it's going to require both.
Yeah.
And
every action costs something to take. Well, except for your personal ones on your tableau.
Sure, that just uses time.
Yeah.
First thing that I want to point out is it's aesthetically pleasing that you just see your building physically grow. Yeah. So you have your tableau out here, and you're laying out floors,
right?
And so it's building. It's drawn in 3D, but it's only in 2D. It's not like Legos, which would have been cool.
Yeah.
Huh. Anyway, but it's still aesthetically pleasing to actually see what you're building. Plus, those floors are giving you kind of rule breakers or special power-up type things.
That tableau where you're building those floors, you have like a little floor plan of 6 rooms that's in your business, and they all do wonderful things for you, but you can acquire better versions of those rooms and put those on there too. So that's just another cool way you can see that grow.
Well, on that same note, there's really interesting decisions to be made between I kind of want to say more marginal benefits here on your player board. Yeah. So you spend time and, maybe it's not the strongest move out there, but it's not contested because it's on my tableau. It's my office, right? Or you kind of have to decide and juggle between doing that and going out there into the world, so to speak, and fighting with everybody for the better benefits.
Right.
And you have to figure out which is more important at what time,
Right.
and the timing of doing that.
The timing, because sometimes you can play on your own tableau as like a stall.
Yes.
And see what other people are doing. But that comes with a cost because, like in our worker placement discussion, we talked about when you place your time markers, your workers in this game, everything cost. But it's incrementally more. So if you're the first one to that spot, it might have cost you 1 money and 1 time, or 1 info rather.
Right.
The next guy is going to pay 2 money and 2 info. The next guy 3 and 3.
Or
so you're stalling with a bit of a risk of increase.
Right. And if it doesn't cost more, then there's a loss of choice, maybe,
Right.
to where, the order in which, okay, I was there first, I get first dibs on something.
Right.
Whereas it may have cost you the same thing to be in there
Right.
as well, but you're getting last licks.
Right. There is some sort of cost involved.
Right. So the consulting firm,
Yeah.
it rewards players who correctly read other players' positions in regards to information. So let me explain what the consulting firm is. So that's going to be, for most players, the main way they're going to get information. And how that works is you take one of your time markers off your player board and put it out there, and it's a decreasing amount of money that it actually costs. I believe it starts with either $5 or $6, and then it's $1 less to go there the second time, or for the next player, so on and so forth. But going there, when you schedule business, you place your marker there, you pay that amount of money.
Right.
During the conduct business, it just slides over. Nothing else happens. That's it. The following turn, when players place out there and they pay to put onto those spots, if someone has backed up, so you have a marker out there, if someone has backed you up out there, then they will push you out, and that's how you get your 10 information.
Right.
And so I love that you kind of have to judge whether or not you can afford to go, say, 5th down on that track, because you have to think, okay, I went 5th here. Somebody's going to have to go 5th, or
Right.
place 5 markers out there total to be able to get that 10 information. And it's a fine gamble, or an educated gamble
Yeah.
on that.
Unlike the other spots where placement is usually more expensive, placement in the consulting firm is cheaper, but the risk is higher.
Right, because you pay less money, but you're taking that risk that no one's going to back you up.
Right.
Because if no one backs you up, you know what you don't get? You're out the money, and you don't get your
That's right.
information.
And I think that's very thematic with consulting companies because they're a risk.
Very cool. Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah.
So speaking of thematic, in my head, I think that 90% of the games of Euro games are pasted on theme, and I don't give a crap about theme. This one I feel is thematic. I really feel like I'm running a business and making decisions about getting my money, my income, and my information income, so I can spend them to boop, 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 put floors on my building, which is not just victory points, but they help me in my efforts.
Right, their special abilities or better,
Right.
more efficient.
This is one of the games where I actually feel a theme.
Yeah, I think the business theme comes through. I agree. So the factory spaces. Speaking, kind of going back to what I was saying a minute ago about gambling, right?
Yeah.
Those are calculated gambles as well. And the reason is, instead of it being fully relatable to other players, the variability. Boy, I'm having a hard time talking today. The variability
What's
of
in that Coke?
Don't worry about it. Of the economic forecast plays a really big part, because we talked about that's going to dictate how many customers are going to buy at the retail outlets. Right. So even though the economy, let's say you're in a depression and maybe there's only 0 to 2 goods that are going to be bought, you still may see players go over there more than 2 players for a couple of reasons. One, it might be a gamble to try and get an extra $6 or $8 if they happen to be higher in turn order, so that they're able to sell their goods.
Higher in popularity, that's the turn order.
Right. Or, and this I think is pretty cool, that let's say you're $1 or $2 short for being able to do whatever it is you're trying to do, say to build another floor.
Right.
You could spend 2 money. I think it's 2 money, 2 information, and 1 good, to be able to go to the retail or to go to the factory, and then to be able to place it out and potentially
Into the market.
Right. Sell your goods at the retail outlets. Well, if you're $1 or $2 short, it might make sense to take that gamble, because you're thinking, if it doesn't sell, I can always liquidate it for a few bucks, and that gives me that extra dollar that I was short. Yes, was it efficient? No, it was terrible, because you used the good and used a couple of information.
Well,
but if you're desperate, there's an option, and there's always that chance for a windfall that you actually sell your good for way more money than you ever expected. Rock on,
In so many of our games that we play, how often do we say, "Oh, I'm $1 short"?
Sure, absolutely.
As inefficient as that is, that's that dollar.
Right.
Right. You can get it.
So another thing here, the time markers, right? So when you hire employees, because you start out as the CEO of your company, well, you're the CEO of your company, but you're the only employee.
You are the one.
And you start out with 4 time markers, which are essentially your time markers, which are your workers.
Right. In a worker placement sense.
Right, but not as employees. Right. As you hire new employees, for each time that you hire a new employee, you do have to take time markers to train them, which again, thematic, because you have to train your employees.
Yeah.
That gives you 3 more time markers to be able to use. So for every employee, you have to pay more money, and by pay I mean you get less income each round.
Right.
Because you don't get to keep it all now.
Salaries.
Now you have to, right. But you get more time markers. And this kind of goes all the way back to what you were talking about stalling. We all may have different amounts of employees. You may have 4, including the CEO. I may have 2. Somebody else might have 2, might have 3, whatever. So we all have different amounts of time markers. And some of the actions that we take, whether it's on or especially on our tableau, some cost multiple time markers to be able to go there.
Right.
So there's one floor that allows you to take 4 time markers and place it there, and you get to go out to the construction company without paying the 4 and 4, the 4 money and the 4 information. Right. And so it's kind of which is more important? Is it time markers or is it money and information? But it allows you, if you have more time markers, you can spend them one at a time on something that only takes 1 on your tableau to be able to stall, to hope that somebody backs you up, and you can always wait and be like, okay, I got this $4 in reserve in case somebody doesn't back me up, but I'm hoping they will. Oh, wait. Thanks, Dave. He did back me up. Now I have these time markers.
I've only got 2 left. Somebody please back me up. You're saying this in your head before I have to do it myself.
Right. As a last resort, I will go there to make sure that I get the information.
Thank God.
Right. But now I don't have to.
But you don't say that.
No, you play it totally cool. Yeah, poker face. But no, I really love that stalling effect that that you can do, and it's almost a game of chicken, but only if the players realize what you're trying to do. But if they see you're third down on that consulting firm and only 1 has been backed up and there's 2 more, people are going to know you're going to stall, and we're just going to wait and try and wait you out and force you to spend that money that you didn't want to spend.
It can get mean over there. That's rough.
Oh, it's fantastic. And I think that right there is one of my very favorite things about this game.
One thing that I like about the game is I'm never bored playing ground floor. Regardless of how many people are playing, there's plenty for me to keep track of the other players and think about, okay, in my budgeting, I need to do this, this, and this. What's going on? You just went there. Crap, that's going to cost me $2 more. Yes, I can afford that. I'm also going to have to go. I'm never... There's no downtime in my head when I'm playing ground floor.
Yeah, there shouldn't be.
No.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Right on. Ground floor, like many games. There's some things we maybe don't like quite so much.
Yeah, I mean, no game's perfect, right?
No game's perfect.
Maybe Arboretum? Couldn't find a fault on that. Anyway, moving on. We harped on this earlier. Maybe not harped, but we mentioned it earlier. The keeping track of the floors. And,
Right.
okay, is it my second floor? And how much? Is it 6 and 6 or is it 8 and 8? Is it whatever? And how many floors is it? Is it my sixth one built or my fifth one built that triggers the end of the game? And I feel like there could have been something that they could have done to make it clearer to where it's like maybe I get thematically this is your ground floor, this is your first floor, your tableau, but it's just I struggle with that at least, and I don't think I'm the only one that has struggles with it.
Until I got to use the ruler, I would always have to look at the board and recalculate it and. Yeah, I agree with that.
So the little cheater sticks help.
That helps me big time.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Ground floor has a rep for being a bit dry. You know, there's nothing. There's no like, wow, did you really just pull that off? Type moves and stuff like that, which doesn't bother
either one of us. I don't think
dorks like us. You know, we don't mind dry games like that. But that's certainly maybe a negative for some.
And I wonder if that might be one of two reasons, possibly, on why I see it for sale so much secondhand in BGG auctions and whatnot. The other reason being that I wonder if maybe there's a false sense of what the game is. And what I mean by that is, it's you look at it and you think it's an economic game, right? And it's not. It's a business theme. Worker placement, maybe resource conversion game, and I kind of hit on that in my original overview.
Right.
And so I feel like if you go into the game expecting it to be an economic game, you're going to be surprised.
Right.
And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I would say it's a bad thing in a sense that if you expect it to be one thing, it should be that thing.
Yeah.
If you go in expecting it and it's not, even if you don't mind that type of game, it might turn you off to the game because you expected it to be something else.
Yeah, I think, for you and me, when we think of an economic game, we're thinking of cash value, right? Some sort of company valuation is the winning conditions.
18xx, Arkwright, Panamax even, right?
Yeah. Right. That to us, that's an economic game. This has some economic elements to it, but the victory conditions are victory points.
Right.
And, like that, the stage 3 floors are all about bonus victory points on top of the things you've already maybe built. And so it's that last round even, or the last 2 rounds where you're trying to build the final floors in your company. It's kind of gamey in terms of, I can get this one and that's times 3, so that's 15 victory points right there, So,
right.
As opposed to a monetary valuation of like an economic game.
Yeah, and again, I think that might be maybe the second or maybe a different reason as to why I see so many, which is a shame because it's a really good game. I really enjoyed this game. Yeah. But I wonder if maybe a couple of those reasons might be, and I don't know if that's necessarily on the publisher as far as, maybe they represented it wrong, or if it's on us, the players, who might have the wrong preconceived notion of what the game is. I don't know which it is, but I feel like there is that just disconnect. I feel like it's
Fair.
And I don't know where it comes from, but as long as you understand what it is that you're getting into, it's a really good game.
Something else that sends me once in a while is late in the game, maybe you've got several employees, so you've got an abundance of time. And the advertising seems almost a non-decision sometimes. I'm going to send these workers over there. It's kind of a pissing match of who's going where. And
to be able to keep up in the player turn order, you're saying,
it's just,
right?
It's like, I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to do this. I don't. It loses
Scripted?
some of its punch.
It's not so. Yeah, maybe scripted. Do you feel like you have to be able to keep up with the Joneses?
It's just forced
Yeah.
non-decision.
Okay, all right, and I can see that. You got anything else?
No.
All right. Well, I think that's a good thing.
All right, so my summary for Ground Floor is that this is a literally and figuratively very well assembled game. The theme is quite apparent to me and my tastes. The gameplay, the mechanics are definitely in my wheelhouse. This is great competitive fun, even with 6, and I really think that's an unusual accomplishment.
Yeah, the 6 thing is still kind of has me shocked, to be honest. So for a summary for me, I would say as long as you're looking for a business-themed game and you're a fan of worker placement and resource conversion, then I think this is a really, really good representative in that genre.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Yeah.
So on a scale of 1 to 6, 1 on the low end, 6 on the high, my rating for this game is that I'd really love to give the game a 5 because I think it's fantastic.
However,
if the victory point thing was more economic,
okay, but isn't that on you?
no.
You don't think so?
Don't make me think that.
Go ahead,
I'm never wrong. No. The game would definitely be a 5 for me, given everything else, if the victory point thing was more economic than victory points.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to give it a 4, which is an awesome, very, very good game that should be considered for a collection.
All right. For different reasons, but similar result.
Okay.
I had it at like 4 3/4, so that makes it a 4. So if it's
Right.
not a 5, it's a 4.
4.99 is a 4.
Is a 4, right. I feel like it's, like I said in my summary, a really good representative for what it is.
Yeah.
It's a really good game, and the thing that almost sends it to a 5 for me is the fact that it plays 6 really well as long as you keep it moving. And I have it. I'm glad I own it, and I will not be getting rid of you will not see my copy in a BGG auction anytime soon.
I will not acquire this for $25 in an auction. Damn.
Sorry. Well, no, it's not to say you won't. You just won't acquire that one. Right.
Right on.
All right. So that's Heavy Cardboard's take on Ground Floor.